This is a transparent attempt from Mark Zuckerberg to protect his company and his share price, and not any sort of principled move that he genuinely believes. To be a billionaire, you have to be a slippery, slimy operator and
Never
move with the
trust
winds. Yo, everyone, welcome back. Brand new Techish. We are back. It is me, Michael Behane, the CEO of Pocket and Pocket Jobs, and I am joined with
Abadesi of Hustle Crew.
Hustle Crew in the building. Yeah, so we have been gone away for a little while and nothing consequential has happened. Actually, before I get to that, please make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. Please make sure that you have left a review and a favorite on your podcast app. We are the greatest tech and pop culture show in the world. So please let the world know that as soon as possible. So while we were away, nothing really happened, right, Abba? So, of course, I'm talking about the fact that
the world just ground to a halt. Yeah, nothing.
I know, literally, the world just said, let's just wait till Techish gets back before we get really consequential. But yeah, we're going to talk about the election. Mr. Trump is back as the president. It was kind of on the cards. What was your thoughts on election day?
On election day, do you know what? You and I were texting around the time of the assassination attempt, or for the conspiracy theorists, the strategic assassination, fake assassination. And you were like, it's done. He's got it. And I was like, yeah, game over, isn't it, for Kamala? But then as we got nearer to the election, this silly little thing called hope took root in my heart and then made me optimistic. But then, I don't know, whatever. It is what it is. We've been here before. I wasn't like happy about it. And then I got home for Thanksgiving a few weeks later and realized most of my family, not most of my family, a lot of my family voted for him. And hearing their reasons was very enlightening for me. I didn't necessarily agree with them, but it kind of made me realize, there was like more to the story than I was understanding from what I was reading and from where I am here in the UK. But yeah, how did you feel? Did you cry? I know you cried.
No, I mean, I had predicted a victory for Trump. I kind of saw the winds changing. I think if we're going to do a little post-mortem, I think the biggest blame has to go to Joe Biden for staying in the race for so damn long. Literally 200 years old, bruv. Like mentally, he's just not there. And the fact that he thought that he could, stay in and potentially win is insane.
Yeah.
I've read articles today where he still genuinely believes that he could have won. So whoever's in his camp and his team that basically kept him going, you are the real villains of this whole thing. I think from his camp around him, it's not Delulu. I think they just wanted to be around power and they thought he's our vehicle. I think Delulu from him and his missus, maybe. Then the other side of it, listen, there was a massive bias against incumbents. Like anytime there's inflation, I think the party in power basically carries that and they're always going to be blamed because inflation really is one of those things that people on a day-to-day can really feel when they're like, whoa,
bias towards incumbents in an election. You're more likely to get a second term.
I'm saying that when there's inflation, the bias goes against the person who's in power. And there's been a massive beating of incumbency parties across the world. So the Tories lost because people are like, oh, the world's shifting to the right wing. Well, it's not the case in the UK. The right wing lost in the UK. But it's because whoever's been in power while there's inflation is going to, take the blame, because inflation is like your boss came to you and said, we're going to cut your salary by a quarter. That's literally what happens. Your spending power goes down by a quarter or whatever that percentage is. And it doesn't recover. The prices don't go down. They just go up less slowly. So that was always going to be a problem. And then what do you make of this whole idea that Vice President Harris should have gone on more podcasts, more bro podcasts, potentially Joe Rogan? They said, do you feel like it was a weakness of the campaign that she never really, had
her
those
and Jordan Peterson
didn't
just have it out? Her and Andrew Tate.
What do you think?
I mean, I definitely think, I don't know, given the time constraint they had, I thought her campaign was really sound. One of the things that I really underestimated and truthfully is still something I haven't fully wrapped my head around is this idea of liberal elite, which is what she apparently represents, and which is what I guess people like Joe Rogan feel more of a people's person. And I don't know, whether this is a true criticism, because to me, liberal elite feels a bit like one of those coded terms that is incredibly subjective, and you just throw it out to anyone who you don't like for other reasons, like she's a woman,
right?
She's a black woman, she's a black and Asian woman. But I did hear this critique from members of my family who were just like, oh, Kamala didn't, she was too much in the liberal elite and didn't do enough to build rapport with everyday people. So maybe to your argument, that is something. I mean, look, who knows? We could hypothesize all day long. The truth of the matter is white men are back on top. Good
Did
going,
they ever
guys.
leave? Did they ever
Going.
leave?
Good going. Yeah, exactly. But
I
you
don't
know,
think they ever
they
left.
were just like, they were just like, you know what? We need to shut this down. Like, we need to knuckle up, bro this out, stand side by side, and do what we know is right, which is look out for each other.
But I
I was
think
just most disappointed in like the women that voted for Trump. I was like, really? Really?
yeah, but
Like,
speaking of like you mentioned white men, I think
mm,
the majority of Latino men lean towards the Republicans for the first time. 1 in 5 black men
mm,
voted for Trump, apparently. So there was a swing across all demographics. It wasn't necessarily just like, I think straight white men probably didn't really move. Everybody else kind of moved towards Trump. So looking at the
mm,
results, it's not so straightforward. And I think the whole thing about liberal elites is that, sorry to cut you off, but the whole thing about liberal elites is
mm,
that the left wing in like in the UK, the Labour Party and the Democrats, they get the college educated vote. The majority of people now who are college educated vote one way, and people who are non-college educated vote the other way, even though the non-college educated people tend to be probably more working class, and you'd think that on paper the policies of the left-wing party would more suit the left-wing party. So what's going on there? I don't know. Like, maybe the left-wing parties need to do more work about vocalizing policies that they're actually doing, and maybe focusing more on those everyday bread and
mm,
butter issues, where whether it's just like, listen, we're going to get you paid family leave, we're going to improve healthcare, we're going to think, and like maybe we get distracted with this whole Trump's evil and we've got to take down Trump. And it's like, well, if you're listening to that as an average regular person, you might just be like, yeah, but what's that got to do with me? Like, I don't care about saving democracy and January 6th, bro. I can't afford eggs. And I think that, to me, if I
mm.
had to guess, would be like one of the reasons what your family members are talking about, which is that like there's a lot of esoteric concepts like saving democracy and Jan 6. And it's like, well, that's got nothing to do with my life right now.
Yeah.
Like, if
I
I'm,
mean,
so yeah.
I think people I spoke to are just very interested in things like taxes, immigration, and like less government intervention, which are all the classic conservative with a small c things. I think one of
Interesting.
the things that I thought was really interesting in the post-election analysis was people that would typically vote Democrat who ended up voting for like alternative parties, like not the Republican Party, but like independent and stuff like that. And a lot of people felt that that was actually because of like the stance on Gaza and not being explicitly like pro ceasefire and kind of trying to like toe the fence a little bit. I think there are also a lot of people who lean towards the left who are like, take a stand and stand up for the end of a genocide and the end of killing and murder and like all this kind of stuff. So I think there's also that. But you know what? Whatever. Let's see what happens. Like, a part of me is exercising my privilege to check out of political news every now and then. It's like the
Yeah.
diet that I give myself permission to participate in. And I highly recommend it to anyone who can also enjoy that privilege.
Yeah, I mean, to be absolutely frank, those of us who have economically done well, there's a part of it where it's like, okay, let's see how it plays out. Like, those of people who have voted for Trump or who voted for the conservative parties that are of a working class tilt, let's see if it works out for you. I don't know. I don't think it will, but more power to you. You voted that way. Let's see how it goes. I think the first real issue now where you're seeing contention amongst people who probably are claiming to be the voice for the working class who have voted right wing is the kind of H-1B visa. So the H-1B
Mm,
visa is like a visa that's heavily used by tech companies to bring in overseas workers. Basically, you have to say that you cannot hire locally, so therefore you need to hire overseas. It ends up being, I think, over 70% of those are taken up by Indian nationals. And just for context, some of the most famous people in tech came in as a H-1B. You got Elon came in, Satya Nadella, Sundar at Google was a H-1B. So this has been around for a very, very long time, and probably to a great success in terms of from a perspective of the tech industry. But when we've had this many layoffs over the last year,
mm,
Elon and Trump are now pushing to expand it, basically. How can you have this many layoffs with this many tech workers unemployed and then say we need to expand the H-1B? Like, it doesn't really ring true. Like, what do you think about this whole situation with the divide now between MAGA, which seems to be Trump and Elon are pro the H-1B, but like a lot of the kind of right-wing influencers are saying like, no, we need to prioritize American individuals who are unemployed.
yeah. Well, I think it's a reminder that people don't always make sense. In fact, people rarely make sense, and people just say things that get them attention. I think Elon Musk and Trump are very similar in the way that they're often like very inconsistent, often U-turning on their ideas, often, you know, changing the narrative, changing the rhetoric. Ultimately, it's a way to be in the headlines again, get people talking about them. They don't care if they're talking about them in a good way or a bad way. All that they care about is that people are talking about them, because attention is power. And the more attention they have, the more they can monetize that and put people in a position where they can manipulate them easily, because it's like, if you want access to me, you must do what I tell you to do. So I guess I'm not surprised that people that on the one hand are very like anti-immigration, white supremacist. I mean, you have someone whose grandfather was in the KKK, and another one whose family literally like benefited from apartheid, participated in apartheid. You have two of them coming together and being like, actually, we do want more immigrants. But it's interesting because obviously H1 is not just any immigrant, right? It's a highly skilled, educated immigrant. We have the top three countries: India, China, Philippines. These are people who are coming into growing sectors or essential sectors. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm someone who's benefited from these kinds of visas. Like, I'm a US person that graduated here in the UK. And it was because of visas like this that I could stay working at tech companies in the UK. I don't know. I'm kind of just waiting for Trump and Elon Musk to fall out, because that is going to be like the biggest fallout of the century. It's going to be bigger than when like Ginger Spice left the Spice Girls. It's going to be bigger than when, you know, Destiny's Child original makeup changed. Like, that is going to be the clash of the century, the millennium. And it's a ticking time bomb. It's going to happen. We know it's going to happen.
1,000%. I mean, it's a very maligned book, but in 48 Laws of Power, the first rule is never outshine the master. Like, and Trump and Elon is, you know, Elon's constantly trying to outshine Trump, and Trump is an egomaniac. He will not have that. Eventually they will break up. I do not doubt that for 1 second. But it's just interesting because I saw Steve Bannon, who was a former Trump surrogate. He came out and said like, yo, we need to pause the H-1B until we have 20% black representation in Silicon Valley. And I'm like, what's going on here? The side, everyone's just flip sides. Steve Bannon came out and was like, yo, we need 20% until we have 20% black, 20% 20, yeah, basically, maybe. Until we have 20% black and 20% Latino representation in Silicon Valley, we should pause the H-1B. But because to me, I agree with him. I'm like, listen, you've obviously got a lot of talent in the inner cities, a lot of people who have been laid off. So to me, the H-1B is not necessarily about talent. It's about the fact that when you come to the country on H-1B, you are tied to your employer. Your visa is tied to your job. So to a certain extent, you are a bit of an indentured servant. You cannot leave. If you try to leave, you're deported. So I think a part of it is that companies like that the talent is more hungry. They like the fact that the talent is more desperate a little bit. And they like the fact that probably they have less leverage over them. So to me, it's not a pure, we can't find somebody. We just have to go get a software engineer, you know, from New Delhi. I'm not buying it personally, right? And I think if we talk to CEOs behind the scenes, it's like a more secure hire
for you, a low risk hire for you, because it's
like
you've got no options.
Yes, it's a lower risk. It's also probably a bit cheaper as well. A software engineer might cost, you know, 180, 250 if they're really experienced. You can probably get one for 120. Let's keep it a buck, like with a H-1B. So this is a very interesting debate, because I'm on one side, I'm actually probably more siding with, you know, the MAGA base, in the sense that, like, I agree that I feel like the H-1B is being weaponized to hurt probably American workers. But also I agree that you should get the best talent from around the world. You should get the Satya Nadellas and the Sundars. So to me, it's like the program needs to be tweaked. It needs to be probably a higher salary to get in. It probably needs to be like a minimum 150 or 120 or 130 to get in. And you need to absolutely demonstrate that you cannot hire locally. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, let's see how it plays out. I just find it interesting.
Look at you turning into an anti-immigration bruv.
I mean, to be fair, like, I think I'm pro-immigrant and I'm pro-talented immigration. I would love to immigrate to the US maybe one day. If they want to offer me a visa, please do it. So I'll be a hypocrite to say no, right? You know what I'm saying? But as somebody who works heavily to like increase representation in tech amongst like Black Americans and Latino Americans as well with my platform, I will be remiss not to argue that there's a lot of talent that's not being utilized. And then if you're going to come in and say, we're going to hire overseas because we cannot find the local talent, I'm going to disagree with that. I think the talent is there, but I feel like you're using this as a way to work around that and get talent that's cheaper and not necessarily can, you know, for example, here's an example. How many stories have we done about Google employees protesting at Google? Google employees are protesting because they're giving weapons to, I don't know, the Israel-Palestine conflict, or they don't want to do it basically, right? A H-1B ain't doing that. A H-1B ain't doing that. They're not. So this is what I'm telling you about what companies are preferring and why they're preferring it. It's not because they care about immigrants. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's because they want to
So you think that
use them to a
tactically
certain extent.
organizations want to like increase the proportion of employees that are on an H-1B visa because that's like retention? I mean, I guess it like assumes that they're willing to like, that they're optimizing for retention over like productivity or something like that. Because you can't assume that just because someone's coming in on an H-1B, they're necessarily going to be like more productive than someone you hire locally, right?
Not necessarily. I don't know if retention is the right word. It's more just leverage. Like a
A low risk.
H1B
Or okay,
cannot
leverage.
leave. Yeah, they cannot leave. So you can get rid of them whenever you want, but they cannot leave. Whereas if you get somebody in who's really talented, after about a year, we know how it is in tech. People want to leave. They're just like, all right, cool. I'm going to Stripe now. I'm going to Amazon now.
Yeah.
I'm going to Google now, especially if you're in demand, if you're an AI researcher, for example. But yeah, let's see. Leave it to the audience. I wonder what you lot think at home.
Yeah.
Hit us up on
I'd love to hear.
#TechishPod. Where else do you want to go now? Because we could talk about MAGA Zuckerberg and his
Let's do
career
it.
pivot.
Censorship.
Yeah, so
Do you know what? This is the thing. Everyone was surprised, but I knew all of this rebrand, personal brand. This is what it was building up to. This is what it was all building up to when he's coming out with his little T-Pain remix, trying to make us find him endearing. You never trust a billionaire. You heard it straight from me. Never trust a billionaire. Do you know what? Even Rihanna, Oprah, as much as I love them, I'm not going to trust them. Like, you have to make me believe I can trust you as a billionaire. And that probability is very low.
Let's explain the context for those back home. So basically, Mark Zuckerberg has come out now and essentially said that, one, they're making changes to the platform. So they are getting rid of fact checkers. And they're going to replace it with community notes, which is what exists on X, which is basically like a crowdsourced kind of like feedback loop. Whereas he's now claiming that the fact checkers that they used were too politically biased. He's now moving people who work within that sort of department to Texas, away from California, which is more liberal, apparently. And then also now he's put Dana White, who's the CEO of the UFC or the founder of the UFC and a Trump friend, on the board. So it's a pivot to MAGA just in time for the election, to be certified, right? So like you said, Mark is a survivor. He's a hustler. He's going to do whatever it takes. And I think 18 months ago, he saw the winds changing and he got the whole broed up image ready. He started going to the UFC. He started rolling onto the Joe Rogan podcast. He knew what time it was. He knew that the Democratic time was coming to an end, and that Trump was coming back.
I cannot be a liberal elite.
Basically. And the thing is, Trump, sorry to make this whole episode so Trump-centric, but Trump is a vindictive king. He will punish anybody who went against him or was not an ally. So you now have to position yourself and bend the knee, which is what a lot of the tech folks are doing. So, Tim Cook has visited Trump's house. I think all the other tech CEOs have done that. And they're all, even Jeff Bezos is bending the knee, and they've had a lot of tension over the years. So can you blame Mark for doing that? Let's talk about this. Let's put shareholder hat on. You are the CEO. But hold on, you're the CEO of Facebook now. The share price is your responsibility. Yeah. You now have a regime that basically will punish any company that is against him. Right? What do you do? Because most likely you do anything that is against shareholder value, you're going to get fired or you'll step down. Although Mark won't get fired, he can't be fired. So this is not really a real example. But like, what's your thoughts as a shareholder, like pivoting and bending the knee to a regime that will punish your company if you don't?
I mean, this wasn't like the only way to avoid being like reprimanded or thrown in jail. Being like, okay, screw censorship. And also it just really annoys me because I feel that like the whole word censorship is now lost all meaning. Right? Because it's censorship is basically like what, in my opinion, incredibly like toxic like figureheads use to justify what would otherwise be known as hate speech. Right? That's the observation that I've made. Whenever someone's like, women should die, Black people should be slaves, and anyone's like, whoa, you can't say that stuff. That's so discriminatory against like a whole identity group. People are like, stop censoring me. Stop censoring me.
Yeah.
You're censoring me. Right? That is what I have observed. Okay. So when you then come out as the owner of some of the largest communications and media platforms, because that's what it is, right? WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook. This is where people are going to understand the world around them, communicate with each other, share incredibly sensitive data that this organization then monetizes from, makes this guy a billionaire, spending it on statues of his wife and studio time with T-Pain. When you then stand up and say, yes, I am anti-censorship, you are basically like using this umbrella term that means nothing or justifies hate speech to absolve yourself of all responsibility for the consequences of what happens on your platform. You're basically like, it's not just riding the wave, like to your interpretation. It's opportunistic, because it's like we are still in the same era of Cambridge Analytica, Facebook swinging elections. We're in the age of mob justice, right? WhatsApp groups that go viral and suddenly someone's being murdered for the rape of a girl that he didn't even do somewhere in India. Like, this is still the same platform where people were like, what are you doing to curb the spread of misinformation? And their response is, it's on you now. It's on you. Like, yo, we tried. It got all political. So you know what? We're just going to do this community vibe thing. We're just going to peace out. The platform's there. Y'all do you. When shit goes wrong, it's your fault. And I'm just getting paid. I'm just printing money. So I feel like there's so many layers to this. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to like jump on the Trump bandwagon. I'm going to be this the guy, whatever. It's also, oh my God, here's an amazing opportunity for me to remove this risk and remove this problem and get even richer. It's less money, right? If they don't have all these people moderating, censoring, that's one massive cost that they can reduce. Yeah. And then secondly, reputationally, they can now say, well, we're just a platform. It's not about what would I do if I were in their position, like delivering money to the shareholder. It's like, before I'm a friggin' CEO, I'm also just a human being in the human race. And if I had the responsibility of Mark Zuckerberg or any of the people that run these platforms, I wouldn't be like, I couldn't sleep at night knowing that I'm just letting people run wild on these platforms, knowing the damage that can be caused based on like the history that's happened so far. To me, it's just completely effed up, man.
Yeah, it's difficult because the example I gave was very flawed, because Mark actually, he has like super voting shares, so he can never even be fired. So the example I gave didn't even make much sense, to be honest.
Could act with integrity.
He actually could do whatever he wanted. Yeah, he literally could do whatever he wants. I think community notes is interesting because I actually like community notes as a feature on X, but would I want that instead of fact checking? I'm not sure. And then secondary, also like this whole idea of censorship. I agree with your assessment that what censorship often means is people basically being upset that they can't say hate speech. But it also does mean, I know people that have spoken out about what's going on in Israel and Gaza, and they've had their shit taken down. I know people who, probably had some legitimate concerns about what was happening during COVID.
So you think shadow banning's not going to still happen just because they say they're anti-censorship?
No. So
Come on, dude.
My point is not that. My point is not that it will be implemented correctly. I'm making the point that even when they say free speech, I'm going to be watching to see if they really mean it. Because what they, so I'm gonna see what happens, man. But I'm telling you that if you're gonna say, yo, let's go free speech, okay, then let's see. But can someone go on there and talk about, geopolitical conflicts and not be punished? Can someone go on there and
say Trump is a rapist?
Yeah, exactly.
Can let's see what happens. Trump is a rapist?
Or can you go on X? You go on X and say things about Elon that might be factually true that he won't like, because from what I've seen, he has shadow banned and also removed content that he doesn't like too. So very often the rules don't apply to the king, if that makes sense, right? On each platform. So let's see. Let me wait and see.
Elon Musk is a pathological liar, borderline narcissist, megalomaniac. I don't freaking know. I'm not a psychologist, but bro's crazy. Can I just post that every day? And will I be censored?
Yeah. But yeah, I completely see that this is a transparent attempt from Mark Zuckerberg to protect his company and his share price, and not any sort of principled move that he genuinely believes. To be a billionaire, you have to be a slippery, slimy operator and move with the wind. And that's what it is.
Never trust a rebrand. Just because you're wearing to be honest, necklace, because you got a chain, we were trying to make me think you're a nice guy.
We were talking about this rebrand for months, and we're like, what's going on here? Like, is he genuinely just like trying to find himself? But I think it all makes sense now. Getting more evil. Basically.
Getting more evil.
So on a more lighthearted note,
that'll be like Hitler just comes out with like hoodie and jeans, like, yo guys, I'm relatable now. No.
Hitler's coming out in drip, yeah? All right, cool. So on a more lighthearted note, I saw this tweet where basically this dating coach basically was talking about how, fun fact, Android gives many women the slight ick. And a guy was complaining about he went on a date and the woman wasn't really showing him love. So then I saw this tweet where somebody says, I think men with Androids are more geeky, disagreeable, or poor, which is why normie girls red flag it. So then this guy said, quote tweeting, I compare specs and prices, I pick a phone. It happens to be an Android. I don't understand the socio-sexual meaning of phone picks. Is this an American thing or what's happening? Someone then replied, specs, geeky, prices, poor, don't understand, disagreeable. Essentially proving the tweet completely accurately.
His tweet.
She analyzed his tweet and said, "Yo,
Savage.
do you think it's fair for women to look at men with androids and be like, yo, this ain't for me, you know?
Why you gotta do me like that? This is like when
Pass."
you're like, okay, anyway. I think, do you know what? I'm not gonna censor anyone's dating choices. If you
Damn.
want to pick your partner based on like what they use as a phone, I mean, for me, that's not enough of a heuristic. That's not enough of a mental shortcut that I can just tally up with,
Yeah.
whatever. Like I admire frugality. I admire doing your own thing. Like if a guy was like, "Oh, I got an iPhone because I heard that girls think you're hotter if you have an iPhone," that for me is a red flag. I was like, get the phone you want to
Yeah.
have. Don't get the phone you think
Yeah.
that
Be you.
women want you to. Yeah, do you know what I'm saying? Like, show up with a Nokia 3310. Go back. Show up. I
Yeah.
was in the club not too long ago. Someone had a BlackBerry. I was like, okay,
Yeah. Shout out
do
to them.
you? Like an old school BlackBerry Curve. He was like recording videos. I was like, I don't know how that video is going to come out. But yeah, I think do the phone that you want to have. But I don't know. I'm just very interested in the kind of content that goes viral because people love to judge people.
I think in America, without like having WhatsApp, which we have in Europe, very popular, which is a very popular app here, you know, the primary
WhatsApp's in
way of
America
having
now.
it is, but it's you know it's not successful. Like, do you know what I'm saying? As in, people use iMessenger and they use group chats on iMessenger. So when you're coming with the green bubble, to a lot of people, it's an ick. And if I was working in Apple, I would be like, oh my God, like we've just, we've hit the gold mine basically here, which is that basically now not using our device means you might not get any sex. So that's literally as a product, you want that, like as a product. If you're working on marketing, advert. You just, you know what I'm saying? If I was them, I would work on an advert right now of a woman saying like, oh, it's great to meet you. And then came back with a green bubble and she's just like, and I'll just throw the phone. She throws the phone down onto the couch and whatever. Like, that's the advert. That's the $1 billion advert right there. That's the end of Samsung right there. That's Samsung's share price. Boom, down. But yeah, listen, you choose who you want to date, however you want to choose in it. Shout out to you lot. Shout out to Team iPhone. I might feel differently if I had an Android. But any closing thoughts?
I mean? I know some very respectable people who are not in the iPhone game. I mean, yeah. I mean, my husband's got an iPhone, but I'm just saying I know some people.
There you go. There you go. I know a lot of short guys that are great. I mean, my husband's 6'5", but that's literally what you just said there. That's literally what you just said there. I know lots of short, great guys, but my husband's 6'9", so shout out to you lot out there. Bless. I'm joking.
6'9". I wish. No, I'm joking.
All right, cool. We'll leave this episode as it is. Thank you for listening, everyone. Hit us up at Techish Pod on Instagram.
See you on YouTube.
See you on YouTube. So subscribe on YouTube and follow us on your app, whichever one you use, podcast app, and share to a friend. I forgot what I was going to say there. All right, peace. Bye.
You did. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Follow us on your typewriter.